Hey guys, in today's tutorial we're going to be taking a look at basic character rigging for animation. We're going to look at what a rig's used for, creating a bone chain and setting up an IK solver, basic skin setup, adding constraints, adding control shapes for the constraints, and keeping your rig clean and orderly. So let's get started. A rig is used for controlling the transforms of objects or bones that are being animated. Rigs allow you to constrain the movement of your skeleton in certain ways to help the animator achieve the desired results for the character animations. We'll focus on simple setups just so you get the basic idea. A full body rig like this one is outside of the scope of this tutorial. Before we begin, let's talk a little bit about bone creation. It's important to remember to always create your bones in the front, the top, or one of the side viewports. You never want to create your bone in ortho or perspective, otherwise you'll get odd results, just like you see here. We're going to make a proxy leg mesh, and this will be just a really simple leg mesh built from a cylinder. So let's go to primitive cylinder, and let's snap it to the grid. So let's turn on our grid snap. Right click and select snap to grid points. Turn off verts. Click OK and go to the center, and let's just drag the cylinder onto our grid like so. Yeah, that'll do. And let's drag a height about like that. Looks good. Okay, let's make sure that we have enough segments so that we can have good joint deformation at the knee. I think we'll set that at about 5. Looks good. And we'll reduce the amount of sides down. We don't need that many sides. I want to make sure that there's a face going towards the front of the screen so that it'll be easy to extrude the faces out and just make a proxy foot. So let's make it 6. Looks good. So continuing on, I'm going to collapse this, convert this to an editable poly. Select face, and we're going to right click and extrude this face, and extrude it one more time, and this is an ugly foot. Continuing on, we will select these verts, turn off snap, drag it on the z-axis, and let's just quickly form a representation of a foot. Going to scale this out, round it out a little bit. And let's pull the toe in just a touch. And pull this guy in a little bit. And yeah, we'll just leave it flat. There's our lovely foot. Scale this in. I'm just going to square this leg off just a touch. Leave it round at the knee. Let's go ahead and take these up. So I'm going to make my deformation point for my knee. The knee will deform around this area here. And there is our, let's call it the cartoon leg. That will do. Now let's make the leg bones. Alright, we have our beautiful cartoon leg here. I've decided I want to make one modification to it. I would like to add a little bit more definition for my ankle rotation or my ankle deformation here. So I want to put another loop in this. So what we'll do is go to Editable Poly, select Edges, and let's go ahead and select the ring of edges there, and we will hit Connect. Now that makes another edge for me. I can bring it down to where my ankle deformation would be, and we'll do a little bit of scaling here, just to tweak the value a little bit. And of course, again, it's a proxy model. Normally you would be adding a lot more definition than this, but this is just going to get us there. And pull the knee in a little bit more while I'm at it. I'm going to offset the leg a little bit, just to be in a position where a normal leg model might be. And also, in order to create the bones, I'm going to need to be able to see through this mesh. So if you hit F3, you can change it to wireframe mode, or if you hit Alt-X, you can change it to see-through mode. Let's go with see-through mode, and I'm going to jump to my left viewport. We'll go to the Create panel, under Systems, and select Bones. And the bones are starting out a little bit small here, so what I want to do is, let's go ahead and make this value a value of let's say 0.2 by 0.2 in width and height. We will click where the hip joint will be and drag to our knee joint. Now you don't want the knee joint directly underneath the hip joint. You want it to be slightly in front to create a slight bend. And this will help us with our IK setup and help us with our joint angle. So we'll select there for the knee. And let's go to the ankle. And I'm going to click on the edge loop there for the ankle. Now we'll go down to the toe bend. And there for the toe bend. And we'll go to the tiptoe and click to end, and notice that our bones like to hang on, so we're going to right click to stop that. And you're still in bone create mode, so any place you click in the window at this point is going to keep creating bones, so you don't want to do that. So let's undo all of that and turn off bone create, and we have our leg. But if you look to the front viewport, you will notice that it's offset from our actual leg mesh. So what we want to do is select the top of the hierarchy, which is the first bone we created. I'm going to hit W for move, and we'll position the entire chain into the leg mesh, like so. Now, see if we're aligned well. Yep, all looks good. Okay, we've got our leg bones created, and we've got our leg mesh created. Let's do a little bit of housekeeping. We're starting to populate the scene a little bit, so let's organize. And I like to use layers, so let's go to Manage Layers. And if we open that up, we have one default layer, and we can create a new layer. And this is the layer that we'll put our mesh in, so let's call it Mesh. And if you select your mesh and select the mesh layer and hit the plus button, it will add that selected object to your mesh. Now you can hide it, you can freeze it so that we don't affect the mesh while we're working with the bones. Now let's make a bone layer. If you select the top of your bone hierarchy and don't rotate it, let's get out of rotate here, there we go, and double click. That will select the entire hierarchy. If we create another layer, and let's call it bones. Okay, now you'll notice that my bones automatically went to that layer and are adjustable within that layer. And that's because they were already selected at the time that I created that layer. It automatically adds whatever you have selected to that layer. Additionally, if you have your layer active any new object that you create will automatically be placed in that layer. So it's always a good practice to have the default layer set as active, so that if you create something new, you know that it automatically goes to the default layer. Now that's all looking good, but you noticed I accidentally rotated my leg. And that can be a problem sometimes, especially if your default position gets changed in some way. Finding that position can be troublesome. So what you can do is you can freeze the transforms of these leg bones so that you always will send them back to their original location if you happen to rotate them out of position. And you will want to be rotating these leg bones very shortly when we apply the skin modifier to the mesh in order to test the deformation of the skin. And it'll be much easier to replace the bones to their original orientation and position if you freeze the transforms. So the way that we do that is we select all of our bones that we want to freeze the transforms and hold down Alt and right click, and you'll get this quad menu. Now the quad menu in the top left has freeze transforms or freeze rotations. Let's select freeze transforms. The warning comes up and says, hey, if you've got anything rigged to this, if you have any controllers or any constraints, you might lose those by freezing the transforms. Do you want to continue? I do, because all I've got is a bone hierarchy right now, so we're going to be okay. So let's hit yes. Now, if I decide that I want to rotate my leg using FK, and rotate it like this using FK, etc., etc., just to get a pose and see what it looks like or anything like that, then rotating it all back into the original position could be troublesome. So let's select all of our bones, Alt, left click, and select Transform to 0. That will pop my legs back into its original position. This is very helpful, and I suggest it with every rig element that you'll be using. And we'll be doing that as we move forward with our IK setup and with our constraints as well. Okay, let's go ahead and do our last bit of housekeeping, and that is going to be naming our bones and naming our mesh. So first off, freeze the mesh, and let's select our bone. And you'll notice the very top bone says bone 001. I want to give it a name that makes a little bit more sense and identifies it as a leg bone, and also identifies it as the side of the body that it's on. So starting up here, let's call this the thigh bone, and we'll start by naming it bone underscore thigh underscore L for left. Alright, and now moving down, let's call this the calf, and we'll call it bone underscore calf underscore L for left. And the same for the ankle, bone ankle underscore L for left. And this will be toe. We'll call it bone toe L. Now this last bone here, we're going to keep it around for a while, and it's not going to be the same as these bones in the sense that we're not going to use this bone for deformation, but I'm going to keep it on the chain, and I'm just going to call it an end bone. And so when we get the rig further down the line, we'll be able to distinguish between bones that are specifically used just to deform the mesh and end, which is another part of the skeleton, but we don't necessarily need it for deformation. So what we'll do is we'll call this end underscore foot underscore L for left. This will be important later when we're trying to sort through which bones are used for deformation and which bones are specifically used just for the rig setup itself. Okay, now if I look in my bones layer, all my bones are named. If I look in my mesh layer, I'm still called cylinder 001, so let's clean that up. In my layer for the mesh, let's select the highlighted objects and layers, That'll select my mesh. And let's just call this leg underscore proxy. And hit enter. Okay, I think we're ready to add a skin modifier on this leg. So the first thing that we want to do is select our leg and go to modify, find skin, and there you have it. Now we'll need to add some bones for the skin modifier to reference. And this is also why it's very important that we follow a good bone naming convention. When you have a lot of bones that you're working with and you have the skin modifier, you're going to need to add bones from a list. And when you select add, the list will show up. And if you've named your bones correctly, like in our case, bone underscore, knowing that everything called bone underscore will be a deforming bone, all we have to do is sort by that and select those and drop them into our list. Now our skin is set up and it's referencing the bones and only the bones that we want to actually deform the mesh with. Now if I freeze my mesh, select my bones, and I rotate, I can see that my skin is now being deformed by the bones. So we can go through our bones and begin to test our deformation. Rotate, rotate, rotate. Okay, and as you can see, it does a fair job of getting us there, but there are some issues. And if you want to see it a little bit more clearly, if you select your mesh and hit Alt-X, we'll get out of X-ray mode, and you can see there's a little bit of adjustment that we need to do at the knee joint. Probably have some verts pull with the knee and the lower leg a little bit more. And obviously there's some problems here with the heel. So let's go to Alt-X again. Let's freeze our mesh. Double click on the top of the bone hierarchy, and remember Alt, right click, transform to 0, and we've reset our bone's rotation back to the 0 position. So now we can start adjusting our skin weights. Unfreeze your mesh, and now let's freeze the bones. And let's take a look at what the skin weights look like. If you go to skin, select edit envelopes. The envelopes are these little circles that will show up around each referenced bone. And these envelopes can be adjusted. If you select the node on the ring of the envelope, you can adjust the envelope's width, and it will adjust how many vertexes it is actually influencing. Pull it back down, and it gets fewer. Same for the other end. Up, you get a higher level of influence. Notice how it turns red. And back down, lower level of influence. Now you can go up the bone chain and adjust the envelope's influence interactively in this way. Similarly, there is an envelope on the inside as well as the outside. You can adjust that, and then you can adjust the larger envelope on the outside that will adjust its fall off. For our purposes, this can easily adjust or modify more verts than we need to adjust at this point. So there's another method for setting these weight values for the verts. And if you select the bone that you want to influence and find the verts that are kind of out of the range, you can select vertices. Go find the verts that you would like to remove from the influence of that joint, and if you drag select around them, you get a little white square around the selected verts. Now I selected these because they're red, and red indicates that they have a value of 1 on that influencing joint. if I go down to weight properties in the skin deformer, the absolute effect value on that vertex from the joint can be set right here. And I can set that to 0, enter, and for some verts it will adjust, but for others it won't because they don't have another influence. So you've got to give them another influence. For instance, at this point I want these selected verts to be controlled by the ankle and not by the calf. So if I select the ankle joint, it will give me all of the verts that the ankle joint is currently influencing by coloring them in red. And you'll see here I have no influence, and you'll see here at the toe joint I have 100% influence. Now if I select the verts that I want to adjust and set their value for the ankle at 1, they'll turn red now. So now there's no influence on the calf joint, and there's a value of 1 or 100% influence on the ankle joint. Same for these guys. Let's say that we want to set them 0. Now if you notice, you set it to 0, but they don't change color because they're not going to change their values since they don't have a joint influencing them. So if I go to my calf and I set it to a value of 1, now it's assigned to a value of 1 to the calf, value of 0 on the ankle. And you can continue this all the way up the chain. Setting its values doesn't have to be a 0 or a 1. You can blend the values between the bones as well. For instance, if I want more fall off for these verts between the knee bone and the thigh bone, I can select the thigh, select the verts that I want to influence. These are a value of 1 for the thigh. And let's go to the calf, and let's give them a value of, instead of 1, 0.5. Now I'm turning orange, or kind of yellowish. But that shows you that you're not a 100% value, you're kind of 50-50, you're halfway in between. And it chooses these color values. And the lower the value is, the cooler your color will be. And it goes towards a blue. The higher your value is, the warmer your color is going to be until it goes to red. So again, let's hit 0.5. Let's turn off our modifier. Let's freeze our mesh, go back to our bones, and rotate them and see what we did. Now we have a very soft deformation on this knee joint. As we bend, it slowly pulls a little bit more of the thigh than it used to. Straighten it out, does the same. Let's see if we fixed our foot. We rotate, rotate. Now the ankle is carrying the entire foot with it. Okay, moving forward, we are going to now start rigging our leg. We have the bones, we have the mesh, we have the skin deformation all set up, and we're going to start by creating our IK solver. So you select the top of your chain, and select Animation, IK Solvers, History Independent Solver. You'll see this dotted line. It's basically waiting for you to select the end bone in this IK chain. You have the first selected, the dotted line's waiting for you to make your next selection. Now you want to go down past the calf bone and click on the ankle bone. What that does is that now creates an IK chain from the thigh bone through the calf bone and to the ankle bone. And if you look closely, you'll see that we have a little helper object at the base of this joint. And it's right there. And this is our end effector. And what that does is allows us to have control over these joints through the use of this IK chain now. Moving the single effector will move the entire joint using inverse kinematics at this point. Okay, let's undo this motion. First thing I want to do is Alt right click and freeze my transforms. And now, as I move this end effector around, I want to move it out of position. can Alt right click and go transform back to 0 again, just like before. Now let's continue with IK. Not only do I need to do the leg IK, I also want to carry IK through the foot. So select Animation, IK Solvers, History Independent IK Solver. Select the foot bone, and then select the toe bone. And one more time, select the toe bone, Animation, IK Solvers, History Independent, and select the toe end. Okay, now if I select my thigh bone and move it in position, you'll see that the IK chain is holding the ankle in position. And likewise, if I select my IK solver on the end of my toe, I'll get a toe bend, undo that move, and at the ball of the foot, I'll get the toe and the ankle rotation, and likewise the IK end effector will control the movement of the foot, leaving behind the end effector on the end of the toe and on the ball of the foot as well. So you can see how that motion is starting to kind of represent the movement of a foot and how that would articulate. So let's undo this, and I'm going to go ahead and select my bone, Alt, right click, set my transform back to 0. Let's select our new IK solvers, or end effectors, and let's Alt right click and freeze our transforms. Yes. Okay. Let's give these guys some names. Let's call this rig underscore IK underscore ankle underscore L. Okay. Going to the ball of the foot, we'll call this rig underscore IK underscore ball underscore L. And let's select the tippy toe, try not to move it, call it rig underscore toe underscore, rig underscore IK underscore toe underscore L. Alright. Ankles named, and we're good. Okay, so now we have all of those. Let's put them in their own layer at this point. So let's select the end effectors, and let's create a new layer, and we'll call it rig. Okay, so now our rig is starting to go into its own layer, our bones are in its own layer, and our mesh is in its own layer currently. Okay, now that we have those, we're going to need something that kind of helps us control those a little bit better than they're being controlled right now. It's a little bit difficult to be hunting down these IK controllers, even though you can change the scale of them, but hunting them down and moving them and manipulating them, I don't think that we're really ready for animation quite yet. We need a little bit more control over these elements. So I'm going to do a simple setup for a foot, and it's going to incorporate 3 point helpers that we're going to align with each one of these IK constraints, and we're going to link them together, and those will control the IK solvers, and then later we're going to attach controller objects to those to help make it more visible, which will be our shape controllers. Let's go ahead and create some point helpers. Go to your left viewport and select point, and looks like 1 is fine. Leave them at size of 1 meter. select one, create one for the ankle, create one for the ball of the foot, create one for the tippy toe, and let's create one for the tip of the heel. Okay. Go to modify, and we'll snap a line by hitting Shift A. Oops, I'm going to freeze my mesh. Try that again. Shift A, snap a line to the IK constraint, or the IK solvers that are on the joints. The toe ball, Shift A. Toe tip, Shift A. And let's go ahead and snap align the heel point helper to the ankle point helper, and let's just move it down on the Z, and we'll move it back to the tip of the heel. Yeah, about so. Alright, back in your left viewport, see how these are aligned? The idea with these helpers is for them to link in a fashion that will actually create our foot control and drive our IK solvers to make the foot behave like a foot. So the first thing that we want to do is link them in the proper order. So that proper order is going to be linking the ankle helper to the ball of the foot helper, link the ball of the foot helper to the tip toe helper, and the tip of the toe helper will link to the heel helper. And if we take a look at how these rotations work, we'll see how rotating the ball of the foot is going to lift the ankle. Rotating the tip toe is going to lift the entire ball of the foot and the ankle, and if we rotate the heel, it's going to lift the entire foot. Now you see how these are rotating. Now let's make them drive the IK solvers. So to do that, we'll select our IK solver, and again that is right at the end of this joint. And by the way, it might make life a little bit easier here. We take our IK solver, there we go. Take our goal display, and let's just set it to a value of 100 for now. Goal display. So we can just kind of see a little bit better what's going on. Alright, so I will select my goal display, and now I'm going to link it to my point helper. One thing to keep in mind is, even though we froze our transforms earlier, now that we're changing the hierarchy and changing how they're parented, that's going to change how our transforms are. So we're going to need to freeze our transforms again on everything, and we'll do that in a second. Toe goes to the toe, and that's it. We don't have another goal for this guy. He just is going to drive the rest of the point helpers. Alright, so now if I go to my selection mode, and let's select the toe, rotate it, and you'll see that it's rotating the foot to the tip of the toe. Undo that rotation, check the ball, good, and the heel rotates more like a foot should probably look. And again, select the upper bone. This will have its own controller shortly, but for now we'll just move it around. And you see we have a foot starting to form. Alright, now let's select everything, Alt right click, freeze our transforms, and name these point helpers. So we named the IK constraints, the IK solvers, rig underscore IK underscore ankle underscore L. Let's name this point helper rig underscore ankle underscore point underscore L. I'll just copy that. Go to the next one, paste that, and take the word ankle and replace it with ball. Copy that, paste it, and take the word ball and replace it with toe. Get rid of the extra L. And rename the heel. Okay, good. So just like the IK, let's make sure that we've got everything in its right place. Select rig, apply these. Now our rig is all being put in the proper location. Okay, moving on. Need to add another constraint for the leg hierarchy, and what this is going to do is create our pivot angle for our knee. So go to the left viewport. Let's make us another helper. You will be using lots and lots of helpers. Point helper, and just create it there. Let's go ahead and give it a name. Start with rig underscore knee underscore look underscore L. Okay. Now if I select my IK for my ankle, this is going to control the leg IK, and in the modify panel what I want to do is set my swivel target, and right now it's at none, so there's nothing to control it. So the point helper that I just created, I'm going to make that my swivel angle target. First things first though, let's make sure that we've aligned this properly. So let's snap a line, Shift A to the knee, and now let's just move it out away from the knee to give it something to look at. Go back and select your IK controller, and we're going to pick our target, and it's going to be now the knee position look at. Now if you select your target and move it, the knee will now look at your target. Unfortunately, what's also happening is the foot is also trying to look at that. It's trying to follow what the knee's doing as well. To fix this, we will select the ball of the foot IK end effector under the motion panel. In the IK solver properties, let's set the parent space to IK goal as opposed to the start joint. Now when I move my knee, my foot stays locked to the ground, which is the desired result. Okay, now we're ready for some shape controllers. Shapes, and let's make them circles. So if I go to my top viewport, I go ahead and just draw a circle about the size of the foot. We'll be duplicating this a few times. So that will be one. Let's go ahead and shift drag us a clone and move it. And we can click our circle. Let's align it to the toe joint, or to the toe point helper. position and rotation. Okay. And this is going to control our rig for the ball of the foot. And leaving it at this scale for now, let's go ahead and move for the tip of the toe. Okay. All day, and align it to the point helper. Okay. Now we can pull the radius down a little bit. And select the other one. Let's pull the radius for that one down a little bit. Now I want to make sure that my pivot stays exactly where it is, aligned to the point helper itself. But I also want to move the shape controller up a little bit so I can more easily grab it whenever I'm animating, because I'm going to be animating directly to these shape controllers. So to do that, what I'll do is, first of all, convert this to an editable spline. And let's just select the subobject spline layer and move it up to a position that feels good for what I want. On this level, you can also scale it if you need to. It's really important not to scale the actual object itself, but only scale at the subobject mode. Okay, select this spline, convert to editable spline, select the spline itself, subobject mode. Let's rotate it up somewhere like that, and represents the tip of the toe rotation. Let me move it back a little bit more. Okay, these are going to be the handles that I literally grab and animate when I'm animating my character. This will be the foot pad. So same thing, convert to editable spline, and I'm going to select the vert on the front, pull it out to the front of my foot, and we'll just, again, in subobject mode, we're going to scale these guys in. Let's select the spline itself, scale it in a bit, select the vertex on the end, and just make a shape. And this is purely aesthetic. You can be whatever shape that you'd like it to be. If you want to follow a foot pattern, if you want to push that guy in, make it look more like a foot, you can make it look like a clown shoe. Who cares? It is totally up to you. So at that point, that's going to actually control the foot. Now we need to set up our orientation constraints. These will constrain the rotation of these point helpers to the rotation of our shapes, our shape controllers that we've just created. To do that, let's start with the ball of the foot. Select point helper. Make sure you're in select object mode while you're doing this. Select the point helper. Under Animation, Constraints, select Orientation Constraint. And again, you have this dotted line. It's looking for something to connect to. So you select your shape controller. This should not move. If you've aligned everything properly when you do this, it should not shift out of position. Okay. Select your toe tip, Animation, Constraints, Orient Constraint, and link your toe tip. Now, if I rotate, ball of my foot is being controlled now by my shape controller. There's no animation going to my point helper. Likewise, the tip of my toe will do the same. But you see how it's bending now. So I need to change my hierarchy a little bit. I'm going to link this toe ball to the toe tip. Okay. Now we've got the expected rotation there. And we have one more thing that we need to do because we've got this heel happening right here. All we have to do at this point is to link the point helper to the foot pad control. And we'll take our two helpers for the toe and the tip of the ball of the foot and the tip of the toe, and we will link those also to the foot pad. Now at this point, if you move the foot pad, the entire rig for the foot will move. If you rotate it, we have a nice foot rotation here. And our controllers are controlling the toes. And we also have a knee control as well. This knee control can likewise be linked to the foot pad. So now the knee look at will move and rotate with the foot. And you can control that. But again, keeping with our theme of only animating on the shapes themselves and not the point helpers, let's create a control object for the actual look at itself. Go to your front viewport, create, circle, and draw a circle around the size of your knee look at. You can shift align it to your knee look at object and link to your controller. Now let's go through and name everything. That is knee rig look. And tell you what, let's clean up the scene a little bit because we have some shapes to rename. Let's see, did we get everything? Yes, we did. So now, let's go back to our default layer. Select our shape controllers. Create a new layer and call them controllers. Now if we hide our rig and if we hide our bones, all we're left with are controllers. So let's give these some names now. Let's call this CTRL for control underscore foot underscore L. We'll call this CTRL underscore ball underscore L. CTRL underscore toe underscore L. And CTRL underscore knee. And we can put the word look if you like. L. Very good. Okay, now that we've got everything in layers, let's select our shape controllers. Freeze the transforms. And give it a run through. Oops. One thing I missed. Looks like I need to link my toe controllers. There we go. So we're going to take the ball of the foot and link it to the toe tip. Since I changed that hierarchy, we'll freeze that transform. And we've got a rotation there. And there's our foot. And let's take the knee control and link it to the foot control. And there you have it. Now let's wrap this up by creating a controller for the top of our hierarchy. Could simply clone the controllers that we made, but we'll make just one more. Let's name it control, or CTRL for control, and we'll call it leg hip L. In our front viewport, we'll align it to the hip. And let's convert it to editable spline. And at the spline level, let's just rotate it into position, leaving that transform aligned with the hip. Spline level, let's scale it up a little bit. Okay, and I'm just going to position constrain. The hip bone to the shape that we just created. And there we go. So now we have our rig, we have our leg, we have our controllers, and if you hide everything but your controllers, including your bones, this would be your animation rig. You can make it whatever color you like. Let's make it a little bit brighter color here. You can make these splines actually renderable in your viewport and set the thickness values up so they're a lot easier to see. And let's go ahead and hide the rig itself, and let's hide the bones. Select our mesh, hit Alt-X, and you're ready to animate. So make sure that auto key is turned on. And at this point, you're just going to be animating on the shapes themselves. And you should just play around with your rig. Go through the process, play around with different constraints. There's a lot of different ways to do this, and there's a lot of different techniques that you can explore. So, the biggest point here with all of this, and always with animation, is you should always have fun and just kind of enjoy it. Thanks for listening.